these more and more effective. They are becoming increasingly accurate, which of course does raise some of the questions around when these things say hit a apartment building. If they're so accurate, when they can strike inside of a clear residential complex, which is an issue day in and day out for quite a while. We've seen in some cases Russia strapping Starlink systems to the top of these to provide terminal guidance direction by an operator sitting inside Russia. The early phases of these Gorons were kind of a fire to forget type munition, where a target location would be input, drone would be launched. It might be able to take some degree of base moment, maybe start out by flying east and then shoot south into the target. But by and large, it was a fire to forget. Russia has recently transitioned to be able to control more of these in the terminal phase, where they're actually striking the target. Technically, that would make it more feasible to hit moving targets. I don't believe we're there yet. On top of that, we have seen Russia utilize a lot of decoys for their shot at. So when we go back to this production facility here, the decoys look the exact same as the regular drones, as the rest of these Goran drones. They just come without an explosive warhead. So any number of these could be either decoys or could be explosive payloads. The issue with that comes back to the same issue we have in the United States when dealing with these. The decoys chew through Ukrainian air defense resource. They pop up on radar systems. They have to be intercepted. And the most cost-effective way to intercept these munitions is with some degree of, we've seen it a couple different ways. Both Ukraine and Israel now, we've seen use helicopters to shoot them down, aircraft to shoot them down. Ukraine has been using some of their F-16s and combat air patrol sorties to shoot these down.
Start showing more you, more skin, more tummy, more confidence, and do it for less.
These down. Surface air fire can be very cost effective. Of course, remember, anything that shoots up is coming back down, so something to keep in mind around some of the more populated centers where Russia is regularly targeting. But then the surface air munitions, things like Manpads or Patriot systems on the larger size, it doesn't make sense. You can't do it. If you were only facing 5, 10, 20 of these in the totality of the war, sure, expend all those Patriot munitions. But when you're talking about, in the last weeks, we've seen Ukraine get hit with 3, 4, 5, 600 munitions in a single night, night after night after night. If you were to use your high-end systems like the IRIS-T, like the Patriot, or others, you run out of those interceptors the first night, and then you would have 400 more drones coming the next night. So there's this onus on both the United States, clearly on Ukraine right now, with the help of their Western partners. But bigger picture, kind of stepping back, we haven't figured this one out quite yet. We know this because we saw during the Iranian attacks in the Middle East, using some of these very similar drones. I'll go back to the video here. We saw the U.S. Air Force hunting down these drones while they were airborne and using rockets, sometimes using guns. And then we saw our ships in the Red Sea utilizing some of their onboard munitions to down these drones. Across the board, most of what we're using is at cost or more expensive to these munitions. So we've got a ways to go, other than like a helicopter firing guns and able to shoot down 3 or 5 of these at a time. This is a big problem. And with this low price point and the scale of production here, you're talking about the increased likelihood that Russia is able to get these in the hands of non-state actors, allies around the world. And we've already seen Iran start to issue these, not just to the Houthis down in Yemen, but I believe Hezbollah in Lebanon utilized some of these as well. So it's a very cost-effective way to allow any group, state or non-state actors, to strike targets 2,000 kilometers or more away. That's a long ways away. Now, an interesting aspect here is that this was previously a commercial facility, and they asked the director of this facility here, hey, do you have any background in manufacturing for defense? Do you have any background in making weapons of war, whatever it might be? And he says, no. But when the war started, or about a year into the war, he says they went to the government and said, we'd like to help. We think we can help by moving our factory to a war footing. And that's what he's getting into right now, how so much of the Soviet country transitioned over to churn out tanks, which I think is actually a really good comparison here. Because there were stories, especially during the Battle of Stalingrad, where some of the tank factories were online, the tanks were roll out the front door and enter the fight. As in, like, straight from the factory, turn a couple of corners, and all of a sudden they're engaging some of the Nazi troops there. That seems very similar to what we're seeing here, where these Garand-style drones are coming off the factory floor, and then within a day, two, maybe a week, Russia is utilizing them to strike targets across Ukraine. Now, there's no telling, of course, how many of these are actually set aside and stored for later use, but the whole reason we've seen a ramping up of production is for Russia to try to overwhelm Ukraine today. So I don't know that they're sitting on some massive stockpile of these munitions down the road. Their goal is to produce these today and use them tonight, if not tomorrow. So very similar in a lot of ways to the tank production
Oh my
in
God.
World War II. Moving back to the clip here, they actually mention that they employ some pretty
Preston
young
Stewart.
people. They mentioned the VT-20, which is a semi-automatic weapon produced by the Soviet Union in mass. So a lot of World War II references here, which is not all dissimilar to most social media at this point. But they talk about, God dang, there's so many drones. And they're big. Hopefully this drives home just how big these things are too. I feel like a lot of times when you hear drone, people think small little quadcopter that you can carry around in a backpack. These are missiles, right? These are small cars flying at people. In fact, at the end of this clip, you're going to see on the back of a truck for a good size comparison. But right here, they talk about college students, okay, but also people fresh out of ninth grade. Look, I don't know what ninth grade is around the world. Here in the United States, ninth grade is 14, 15 years old. So that's a kid. We generally throw 18 as the time that a child becomes an adult, can join the military, things like that. Maybe Russia is just kind of putting out there into the open. They've got some 14 and 15-year-olds working in this drone production facility, or maybe that's one of those things lost in translation here. Nonetheless, this is what it looks like when a country starts to make that move towards a full-scale war footing. Russia is not there quite yet. They are a lot closer than we are here in the West, and again, very reminiscent of a lot of what we saw in the United States during World War II, where factories just shifted over and started pumping this stuff out to win the war day after day. Another piece worth highlighting here is they hit on a couple times how this is a commercial facility. It's not. Doesn't look military from the inside at all, except that all of these are weapons of war.
This is why I canceled my DoorDash subscription and switched to Cooking Mate. After months spending way too much on DoorDash, I got bored of eating the same fast food meals and paying way too much for them. Cooking.
It wouldn't be crazy if Ukraine, which I have no doubt is probably looking over this footage and trying to identify exactly where this thing is so they can fly some long-range strike drones into it to at least, if nothing else,
Exactly
slow
my
down the
thought.
production of this facility. But I would expect that this gets hit with the drone at some point, or an IED goes off or set fire, and the immediate response is that a civilian factory was attacked by Ukraine. When, as Russia transitions more and more their industry from purely civilian use to maybe mixed use, or in this case, unless there's like large parts of the factory they're not showing, this entire thing is simply producing weapons that are being used to kill Ukrainians day in and day out. Now, they do kind of wrap up this Garand portion showing the launch of these drones. For whatever reason, they're all about these Ram trucks right now. They put out a bunch of pictures showing these as well. I don't know exactly why. Maybe just kind of a poke in the eye to any Americans like us watching this. They do have a lot of their own domestically manufactured trucks that seem like they could do the trick, but nonetheless, start to finish here, we've got a very low-cost operation. So you've got pickup trucks launching these things. You've got low-cost hangars. Look at what they're being stored on, just some welded pipes together. Everything throughout this, start to finish, is very easy to mass produce. And that's what we're seeing Russia do right now. And it's a problem for Ukraine today, and it's going to be a problem for NATO countries going forward. Anybody that faces off against Russia or any Russian adversaries. The cost differential to intercept these munitions is not in our favor right now. Again, in a very short-term, high-intensity conflict, we have what is necessary to stay in the fight, no doubt. But over the long term, like Ukraine is having to deal with Russia right now, with these Garans or Shaheds or whoever's producing them and decide to name them something else, the longer those stay in the fight, day after day, week after week, month after month, has a significant chance of eroding air defense assets, and we are not immune to that, not by a long shot. So it's worth noting how quickly Russia is transitioning to being able to churn these things out in real time, and hopefully here in the United States and with our allies around the world paying attention and coming up with low-cost interceptors, low-cost protective measures to counter this threat. Now, there were a couple other clips. I mentioned this was a 40-minute video, and there are some other aspects here I wanted to show you guys. The next one being the type of kind of innovative drone or a new type of drone. This one's weird, I think. They say that this is, a part of me thinks this is like a glide drone. They refer to it as a Comet, but it's an FPV-style drone still. Takes off vertically and then turns. And they say that this wrap around it increases the range 3 times over, which is staggering. To increase the drone range 3x. But I don't get that part right there. How does the drone, if the drone just lifts off, I guess if it flies the entire time like that, maybe it's some sort of glide mechanism. I don't think we've seen this, and he mentions the smaller one there for what it's worth, is for interceptions to take down Ukrainian drones. I don't believe at this point we've seen this in use at all on the battlefield, but I don't know. This is one of those things where everybody is testing stuff day in and day out. We're getting very new and innovative tactics coming from both Ukraine and Russia. I mean, in just yesterday's video, we talked about this new operation carried out by the GUR, I think it was the GUR, and definitely the 73rd Special Operations Group in Ukraine, utilizing unmanned surface vessels or drone boats to launch bomber drones into Crimea, where they attacked Russian radar sites. That's new. They made an aircraft carrier, right? I don't think that was really in the cards all that long ago, but it's a very real thing today. So I'm trying to brush things aside as they come out, even if, like, this kind of glide type drone looks a little weird. Nonetheless, we'll keep an eye out to see if this does make its way to the battlefield at some point in the near future. Now, they actually started this video focused on the FPV drones and getting a little bit into the fiber optic aspect of that, although they really brushed over it. I wish there would have been a lot more time spent in this Russian segment talking about their interceptors. They just didn't. They at one point talked about, we've got this new shell shotgun that can effectively shoot. It's best designed to shoot down drones, and they just showed a guy shooting a shotgun. And then the interceptors were like this previous video, where the guy's just holding one saying, yeah, this is one of our interceptors. That's an aspect of this fight that is very, very much cat and mouse. I've been very interested to see Russia highlight some of their interceptors currently in use. But nonetheless, shifting over to this FPV version, they say they're following a group of Russian soldiers in the Sumy direction from the 40th Brigade. And something I want to note here is this is the exact same thing you're seeing from Ukrainian soldiers in a lot of ways, especially when you're getting to the FPV tactics. Cat and mouse is the best way to put it. We see new innovations on one side, it's shortly thereafter copied by the other side. There are relative advantages in a lot of different directions, but this movement here of pilots and operators towards the front line with a handful, 5, 10, 15 FPV drones, and then launching just strike after strike after strike, that's the FPV war right now. I wanted to play this because we generally see a lot of that aspect from the Ukrainian perspective, not a lot from the Russian perspective. Something else they highlighted here that I don't think I've seen a lot on Ukrainian videos is the maneuvering of these drones and how they do barrel roll. I don't know why you do barrel roll.
Do you have $100? Because I'm looking for 2,000 believers who are willing to trade $100.
How you do barrel roll in an FPV drone? That seems like a good way to when you got a big warhead strapped to it, seems like a good way to lose control of the drone entirely. But they also highlight something we talk about quite a bit on this channel, the effectiveness of these pilots and how accurate they're getting. They're not just hitting static targets, but they're able to hit motorcycles on the move, fly into trench lines, into dugouts. We've seen them move around fences that protect, say, armored fighting vehicles or artillery pieces or mortars in the tree line. We've seen them dodge trees, especially when they have the fiber optic cable attached. I've seen some folks recently talk about, hey, maybe a bunch of drone operators from around the world could get together and go participate and help Ukraine, right? Just that many more pilots. I think it's easy to look past just how incredibly effective and highly skilled these pilots have become. It's not just about being able to fly a drone from point A to point B, but it's about identifying the weak point on the target, looking for that weak kind of. This is hunting in so many ways. And identifying, do you have the right munition to fly into that hatch? Is it better utilized to hit a track? Do you go after a wheel? Do you go after the